You know, if you know, I only wear the color red. It's very, very easy to avoid all things blue. If you only wear the color blue, it's very easy to avoid all things red. But when you're like, I can wear an equal amount of red and blue, it's harder to measure out, okay, well, have I worn too much blue this month? Should I let myself have red? I don't know, I'm overwhelmed, right? It's like harder to control, and that's when balance is just like this sometimes stress-inducing and difficult thing to manage. Hey besties, what is up? It's your girl Jazzy. I'm fresh out the shower, as you can tell by the lack of a look that I'm giving. Hope that you are well, or as well as you possibly can be. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jasmine Kylene. I am a spiritual counselor, I'm a journalist, I'm a girl. I'm a girl. I'm just a girl doing her best, and a very bad accent. I am reporting to you live September 20th, 2022, which if you are not watching this during time of upload, this is when there were 16 planets in retrograde, and so it's been a very, very reflective time. And I've been in Spain, or I've been in Europe, honestly, for like, I don't even know how many, like 6 months now. I'm about to go back to the States. I'm finally at the point where I'm excited to go back to America, and I'm just feeling, as this Mercury retrograde is probably forcing me to be, which is very introspective and reflective, and I wanted to just talk out some of the feelings that I've been having surrounding the theme of balance. So quick little astrology tidbit, this current Mercury retrograde is in the sign of Libra, which is affecting us in a monumental amount of ways, and I have a whole video on this specific retrograde and how it may be affecting you via your rising sign, so definitely check that out if you feel called to. But I think one overarching theme for the entire collective, especially because it's in the sign of Libra, is this idea surrounding balance and our relationship with balance in our lives and the ways in which we may be experiencing any sort of imbalance in our lives. And it's something that has been coming up in a lot of the personal readings that I've been doing for any of my clients, but also it's just been coming up in my own conversations with myself, in my journaling, and I have really been wanting to confront why is achieving or maintaining a state of balance so fucking difficult for me. And I wanted to make a YouTube video about this because I think I'm starting to crack a little bit of undoing when it comes to why is balance so difficult for me to achieve, and I wanted to share it in case it sort of sparks any sort of insight for you and maybe further exploration for yourself. But I want to go back to the root of it and say that obviously because this Mercury retrograde is in the sign of Libra, and Libra is the sign that rules balance and fairness and justice, right? The scales. The sister sign to Libra, right? So in astrology, sister signs are sort of like the polar opposite sign, the sign that's directly on the other side of the zodiac wheel. While on the surface they're very polar opposite, there's also a lot of like similarities when you really go into like the depths of them, which is why I think they're called sister signs and not like polar opposite signs. But anyway, the sister sign to Libra is Aries, and I've been sitting with not only that polarity, but like my relationship with extremes, right? So I think Aries obviously embodies a lot of different traits, but one of those traits is a sign that lives in extremes, right? I think Aries, they're always like, they're never in lukewarm water about anything. You know exactly how an Aries feels about any subject. They're very out loud and upfront and immediate about how they feel, which I definitely admire. And I think that like they bask in being on a end of a spectrum, not anywhere in between, but on the end of a spectrum. And I think that as someone who's predominantly fixed, and as I'm sure many of you who may be relating to this are, or just if you don't have major fixed placements, you relate to this idea that like there's a lot of safety in extremes. I think that I struggle with balance, and I struggle with balance in a lot of different areas. I struggle with balancing my human and my spiritual, trusting and allowing versus like being really direct and disciplined and manifesting with clarity. But also just like in general, I will either be like, you know what? I'm completely sober. I am not, I'm not gonna drink at all when I go out. I'm not gonna smoke any weed. Like I'm fully in my sober shit. And then I'll have a period where I'm like, I'm young, I'm wild, I'm free. And I'm gonna go out as often as I possibly can. I'm always somewhere or the complete opposite of that place. I'm either in full devotion to curating and perfecting a romantic love, or I'm like, no one is going to touch me for the next 6 to 10 months while I am in full isolation and hibernation. Like, And I think that it has a lot to do with me predominantly being fixed, but I also, what I think my recent breakthrough has been, when I really reflected on why am I always at an extreme, I realized it's because extremes are much easier to control. I think you can measure out when you're in extreme. So for example, if you're very, very, very much in your spiritual era right now, then you can measure that out. There's something tactile about that. You can meditate every single day. You can cut out any sort of communication with the 3D universe. You can really be in that crown, third eye chakra energy and just be completely immersed in your spiritual world. And like, you can really identify what does not align with being in that world and live in that fully. Or, you know, if you're on the other side of that polarity, right? So if you're sort of evading your spiritual practice and you're really in your human shit, then you're probably sleeping in and you are eating a lot of heavier foods and you are avoiding meditation or avoiding anything that's along the lines of astrology. You're like, you know, you're really in your 3D, which I'm not shitting on either end. I think that honestly, both extremes can be helpful and harmful, right? And the idea would be to be in a perfect harmony, a perfect balance, but like, it's harder to measure out and it's harder to control when you're not in an extreme. Because in an extreme, everything is defined. Everything has its specific place. And so when you're trying to achieve a state of balance, you're being forced to confront this idea of like a release of control and recognizing the fact that you won't fully understand the perfect measurement. You won't know what goes where and how much of what goes where. And there's like a lot of trust that comes with sort of striving for a state of balance. And there is a surrender to the inevitability of like failing or getting it wrong, right? If you're trying to maintain balance when it comes to your social life versus being, you know, in a healthy state of isolation, or you know, I think for me, one balance I'm trying to work with is like knowing that the more that I spend money, the more that money will come to me, because money is energy, and as long as I don't stress out or am too controlling around it, it'll be always in a flowing state of energy, versus being responsible and budgeting and like being aware of my finances and responsible with my finances. And like, I find that there are times when I try to balance both energies, I am falling way too far on one end and I'm neglecting another, or vice versa. And I have to accept the fact that like, when you are striving for a state of balance in any area of your life, it's going to be imperfect. And if you are struggling to sort of formulate a healthy sense of balance in any area of your life, I think the first question to address is, what is my relationship with control? What is the fear that stems that relationship with control, right? Because if you're struggling with control, there is some sort of fear that you're evading or some fear that you're working from. There's a state of fear, right? So a fear of being seen, a fear of failing, a fear of being abandoned, you know, whatever you're trying to hyperactively control. I thought that my hyper independence was like a healthy trait, and it really was me being way too far on the isolation scale, because there is so much control that I get from being in isolation, because then I don't risk rejection or abandonment, all those fears that have ruled me for so long. So yeah, if you're struggling on any end, so yeah, that's the first question I would invite you to ask yourself. It's like, what fear is stemming this relationship with control? And the second question I would invite you to ask yourself is like, what is your relationship with perfectionism and how you appear to others? You know, it's easy to get things right when you're in an extreme, because like I said, it's much more easy to measure out things and to understand where things go and what doesn't belong when you're in an extreme. You know, if you know I only wear the color red, it's very, very easy to avoid all things blue. If you only wear the color blue, it's very easy to avoid all things red. But when you're like, I can wear an equal amount of red and blue, it's harder to measure out, okay, well, have I worn too much blue this month? Should I let myself have red? I don't know, I'm overwhelmed, right? It's like harder to control, and that's when balance is just like this sometimes stress-inducing and difficult thing to manage. And then it challenges your relationship with control, your relationship with getting things perfectly done, and yeah, it's just like a very triggering thing. I found seeking out balance in my life to be a very triggering thing, especially when it comes to my relationship with like exercising and eating healthy versus like living my life freely, because then other things underneath that get triggered too, like my relationship with food entirely. But like, sometimes I'm like, no, I'm gonna let myself indulge and have yummy things because I'm a human having a human experience. And then I'm like, no, wait, discipline and healthy regimen actually really does make me feel better, and I don't want to disobey it either. So it's like, I don't know, I struggle with balance. My sun and moon are both fixed signs, so I find that being so fixed and so stubborn definitely is like, it's not conducive to someone who's very good at being in a state of balance. But my rising is mutable, and I feel like the mutable signs are good at balance. So yeah, I don't know, learn from your fellow mutable signs. Yeah, ask yourself those questions. Ask those questions related to control, to perfectionism. And I think when navigating seeking out balance in your life, extend yourself as much grace as possible. And this is a conversation I've been having a lot with the people in my life, like on a separate tip, but like we've just been talking a lot about how in this journey, I think in spiritual journeys entirely, you can get caught in this narrative that you need to always be feeling like you're in a state of bliss and you're in alignment, and anytime you're out of alignment, there's this quiet voice of almost, I don't know, at least I can speak for myself and say that anytime I know that I'm out of spiritual alignment, or that my vibration is lower than I would want it to be, I get very mean to myself, and I get like, well, you know, if you're out of vibrational alignment, it's because you did something to get yourself out of that. You were thinking a low vibe thought, or you were doing a low vibe thing, and so now you need to meditate and cleanse your space and you know, light up an incense and like, you know, purge the sin of being in a low vibrational state, instead of what I'm actively practicing now, which is just like holding myself through when I feel lower vibrational, and not like guilting myself of it, because like you need the contrast in order to appreciate when you're not in that state of contrast. So like I just am trying to extend myself as much unconditional love as I would want others to extend me, and recognizing that I don't need to be a, like, I mean, it's impossible to constantly be in a state of high vibe, you know, alignment. You're always seeing repeating numbers, you're always having these crazy synchronicities. Like if that was your constant state of being, there would be nothing special about it. So like I recognize the fact that like I need to ebb and flow. I need to energetically fluctuate in order to be sure that I'm alive. So I think you should extend yourself that same mindset when it comes to trying to maintain a state of balance in any area of your life. And also I think it's cool if you have anyone on the journey as well, and that you kind of share with them the journey that you're on, so that they can kind of hold you accountable if they find that you're ever hard on yourself for, you know, edging on one side of the spectrum a little too far, or whatever the case may be. But yeah, I think this Mercury retrograde in Libra is really going to highlight what areas in our life are severely imbalanced, and invite us to find ourselves in a state of ease. But I think if that's difficult for you, the first thing to confront is, why is balance hard for me? And why is it that I found safety in extremes? I think it's also worth noting that like safety in extremes can stem from traumatic experiences. It can be a trauma response. I think for me, yeah, there's just been a lot of experiences in my life that have put me in fight or flight mode, or like survival mode. And I think that extremes mirror that sense of safety that come with being in fight or flight mode, right? Like if I'm constantly alone, then I can control that, which stems from a trauma response of me being in survival mode in different parts of my life, where I was only safe when I was like fully in my head and fully alone. So like, yeah, like I said a million times, reflect on your relationship with the extremes, what traumatic experiences or what fears may have built a safety net around those extremes, and how you can set yourself free by first and foremost fucking acknowledging it and talking about it, and knowing that like I don't necessarily have the answer of how to fix it, because I'm on the same journey as so many of us are. And sometimes what mends the harshness of navigating that journey is just recognizing the fact that this is harsh terrain, and like speaking that out loud. So yeah, there's no way to perfect balance. And it's funny that we're talking about something, right, where like balance is said to be like, you know, like the scale's like this equal amount, but I think it's difficult to like perfect an equal amount of something that is not something that you cannot measure. There's a word for that. There's a word for something you can't measure. What is the word for that? Someone tell me what the word for that is. Immeasurable. Oh, that actually might be it. But that doesn't feel right, whatever. Anyway, the point is, you're not gonna get balance perfect, and you have to be okay with that. And if you're not okay with that, where have you learned that you are only worthy of giving yourself a pat on the back when everything was done perfectly? Why have you villainized imperfection? There are very few things on this earth that are perfectly symmetrical. Like, things are supposed to be a little bit off kilter if they are human and real, and you are human and you are real and you are raw. So yeah, just like let yourself be okay and surrender to doing things maybe a little bit wrong, in pursuit of doing them as right as possible. So yeah, happy retrograde season. There are so many fucking planets in retrograde, I'm actually nauseous. I will be back on the tube to talk about this upcoming, what is it? New moon in Virgo. And I'm also going to be doing I don't know if this will be up in time, but a fall equinox ceremony ritual with Jess, this incredible Reiki master that I work with a lot. So I'll also be sharing that. But yeah, I'm sending you guys all my love. If you want to work with me one-on-one, I do readings and spiritual healing sessions. You can do so by visiting my website at Jasmine Kylene or finding me on Instagram at Jasmine Kylene. And yeah, I'm sending you all my love. Please navigate this retrograde season with as much stillness and grace as possible, as I'm trying for myself. And I will see you next time. Bye.